Alright, welcome everyone. My name is K. Michael Russell. I am a comic book colorist. Welcome to my YouTube channel. So this is the cover for Postal number 25. This is actually going to be the last issue of Postal, at least for a long time. Who knows? I hear rumors that it might come back, but 25 is going to be the last issue. And this is a cover by Isaac Goodhart, colored by myself. And I didn't have time to send it to my flatter because of the deadline, and so I ended up flatting it myself. And I'm going super fast through the flats because this is kind of the boring, dry part, and I thought you guys would appreciate me speeding up through this, but I did record it all, so why not? This is a kind of an homage, not an homage, but it's inspired by like kind of the old postcards from the, I don't know, 40s, 50s, 60s, somewhere in there, probably the 50s or 60s. And so you see me popping back to look at reference every now and then for this particular image. And the more and more that I worked on it, I realized that I wanted it to look like a photo of this cover, you know, like a photo of the postcard instead of just a comic book coloring. So I ended up doing some things I really hadn't tried before. I thought it'd be interesting for you guys to see. And once the flatting is done, I'll slow it down a little bit. This is actually at 20 times speed, like 2,000% increase, so it's really, really fast. And I was really happy with how this turned out. This is actually probably my favorite cover, and we've done several, but this is the number 25 would be the 12th consecutive issue of Postal for me, and so that was always kind of a professional goal, was to get a full year of a book all at one time. A small milestone, but I thought it was cool. So this is me. I'm still just separating out all the different elements. I ended up having to go back and add one of the flowers that I forgot last time, but I'll let you know when we get to that point. First time coloring Buffalo. And we're almost done flattening the interior of the letters. I really like the fact that when I was done, I wanted the violence that is inside the word Eden to sort of sneak up on you. So if you hold the cover at arm's distance, you might not even notice what's happening in the letters. And then as you start looking closely, it's like, oh wait, there's all sorts of awful things happening inside the word Eden here. Eden is where the story of Postal takes place, and it's been optioned by Hulu to create a TV show, so we'll see. You never know with TV deals. So I ended up doing a color overlay over the letters, just I think in overlay mode. That was kind of an orange. And then here I am trying to adjust the inks, because I want those to be pretty kind of a dark red too. There ends up being, I don't think there ends up being any black on this image, even in the ink. I think every last line of this ends up being a different color. So one of the reference cards had the greetings line in all white, and so I ended up just selecting all of those and changing it to white, and then copying that to a new layer, and then doing a drop shadow on the layer, which I ended up messing around with. It starts off faded, but it looked too digital, and it didn't really look right for the period, so I ended up changing that later. But here I am selecting all of the lines for the clouds. I want them to be a really light blue. I think I originally make them a little purple, and they end up getting changed to a blue, because I was zoomed out too far when I changed it and didn't realize how purple it was. And here I am checking reference again, and I realized I want to paint out the edges because none of these old cards had these black lines, so I ended up making those pretty much the color of that yellow border. I also eventually end up removing the black from around the edge of the card, which again helps to sell the fact that it's all one printed sheet. And so here you can see me in making those adjustments here. I'm really trying to match it pretty closely to that yellow color, but it's not exact, but it's close enough. here I am, I think, yeah, changing that effect around the word greeting there. Checking my reference again. And now I want to change the lines on all of the flowers, so I'm just selecting all of the lines separately from the rest of the image. And these colors get adjusted brighter and darker several times throughout the course of the image, because there ends up being a lot of layers on top affecting it in different ways, and so I kind of go back under and adjust it back and forth. But I was basically trying to fake the fact that the whole thing was painted and not comic book art with colors and inks and all that. This is me playing around with lots of different color modes for the paper texture I wanted to use. It's tough to find a texture that's, you know, got enough contrast in it, and I adjusted the contrast quite a bit. But enough contrast you can see the messiness in the paper, but it also doesn't affect the color underneath very much, because it's really easy to see, you know, all this messiness in places, but it would affect the lines too much, or it would affect the colors too much. So I ended up in linear light mode at a pretty low opacity. It was around, I don't know, 30 or 40%, I think. Here I am adjusting those flower lines again. And I think here is where I start with the shadows. Yeah, I start putting some shadows under the paper because, you know, if it's curled up, it's going to throw some shadows, and I kind of brush away part of it in the middle so that it looks like it's curling up, and ended up making the shadow there kind of a brownish color because I think some of the light would go through the paper and turn it kind of red a little bit. Here I am changing the lines on the blood. It's just a little bit darker than the blood. Not much. Here I am staring at it, trying to figure out what to do next. Because of the texture on the paper, everything else started to look too smooth. And so I ended up putting texture over everything. I put texture over the envelopes underneath. I end up putting texture on the desk, like a wood grain texture there, because all of a sudden wherever there wasn't a texture, it looked too digital, and that's what I was trying to avoid with this cover. So I want to kind of draw attention to the middle of the image and help frame it a little bit, so I end up putting a multiply layer on top, and ended up doing a very hard shadow along the bottom. It just looked more realistic. It looked too much like a spotlight without that. So, and it's on top of almost everything, so that way I can paint underneath and turn it off and on, and it really, really made it look a lot more realistic almost immediately. So here I am going in and changing I'm selecting the black in the lines and then erasing or deselecting everything else except for the line around the card, and then I shifted the color of that, so the border for the card got shifted to like an orange. And then I realized that if the card is sitting there and it's folding up, it's not just laying dead flat, then you would actually get some lighting effects along the card, kind of like a glare. And so I ended up putting that on these corners, ended up changing the one in the top right. Bring Isaac's signature back. Ended up doing some subtle highlights on the blood and some shadows under the blood. This is, it wasn't a lot. I didn't put it everywhere. I just wanted it in a couple of places to make that a little bit more interesting. More shadow. Play around with that a little bit. That's just, again, just on a multiply layer, or a solid color adjustment layer in multiply mode. More staring at it, trying to figure out what to do next. There's a lot of that. Because I was having to learn things I had never done before with this. And so I think I'm about to put down the wood grain Yep, so build up a bunch of examples, try to find one about the right scale, because you don't want to see like boards or anything like that. You know, it's not going to be that scale. So the textures and overlay mode, played around with the color of it, just hue adjustment, and it's masked off from everything else. So, and then I lower the opacity just a little bit. And here I am putting in some shadows. Shadows are kind of irregular because I'm thinking, you know, the blood is irregular. It's drying in places, it's wetter in places, so the shadows are kind of rough around the edges. Alright, so I'm painting the clouds white and then switching to the plains and the mountains in the background and throwing some colors over all of that. Went really quick. Coloring the trees. I tried painting a color and it ended up being too yellow and ended up getting rid of it. I think color balanced it out, or yeah, did something. First time ever coloring buffaloes. The babies are a little lighter apparently, so did my research on that. And then the flowers and all the rendering on the flowers, I wanted it to be kind of flatly colored. Not like flatly as far as flat colors, but I wanted all the lighting to be very, very similar throughout all the places on the flower. So I just used an adjustment layer to adjust the levels, and then painted on the adjustment actually. Here I am, I think, playing around with what that's going to end up being. I ended up lightening this up a little bit. I think after I'm done, because it wasn't. Yeah, there we go. It wasn't showing up enough, so it's just brightening up everything. And even under the shadow on the card, I'm painting under that because obviously the shadow on the card is not going to affect the shadows on the plants within the card, if that makes sense. Then I realized that should have been a flower instead of the green part, so I just changed that underneath. One of the benefits of working on multiple layers like this. I do think this image ended up with more layers than anything else that I've ever done, because I was doing a lot of tweaking, and I could tweak at every stage if it was in different layers. I just add a little bit of a glare to that bottom left because these cards are generally kind of shiny, so ended up making it pretty reflective. And I'm going to start rendering here, I believe, the people inside. And I was originally going to paint it all and then turn all of the adjustments back on, but I end up just putting all the adjustments on and then painting underneath it, because I could see what the final result was going to be as I was working, instead of waiting till I was done and then seeing something I didn't like. And that's on yet another multiply shadow layer with a really bright color. That red color is actually pretty bright. That's kind of the key of working in multiply mode, is make sure that the color is pretty bright. Otherwise it gets way too dark way too quick. I used to be really scared of multiply mode because it just made everything too dark. But I was using colors that were too dark. So I really wanted to make sure the focal point in that E was that guy's face getting slammed, so more highlights there than anywhere else. I ended up getting rid of anything blue or green or the least bit cool within the letters, because I realized I wanted the letters to be really warm, just super warm, and to really contrast with everything else around it. So like that green shirt that you see in the D there is going to go away. And this is a Kyle Webster brush I'm using that I've discovered recently. I really like it a lot. It's got a kind of a messy texture to it. The flow is really low, so you get a lot of, you can layer it really easily. And I think the square brush is a Borodante brush. Here I am changing that that shirt color. And all of this rendering is being done on an adjustment layer. It's just a levels adjustment. It's not really adding any color or anything, it's just brightening. Because there's an overlay layer on top that's going to add the color. The explosion was, I think, pretty straightforward. I kind of like the challenge of painting with a square brush. You kind of have to do a lot of cleanup with it, which makes it look more painterly. So it's a bit of a challenge to make that look right. And I realized that I kind of liked the effect of having to smooth out all of those edges. Getting pretty close to wrapping this up. I think I do a color balance adjustment on the letters to yellow up the yellows even more, and to darken anything that's dark and make it more red. So the shadows got a lot of red added, the highlights got more yellow added, so everything within those letters is basically red, yellow, or orange now. Alright, so what else? I end up taking that highlight away from the edge and making it a shadow, because to me it made more sense. Tried a couple of different things here, ended up just softening that up a little bit. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This is I painted the edge of the card yellow to give it a little bit of thickness there. I like the way that ended up looking. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to check that thumbs up button to give it a like, and subscribe to the channel. I know you guys probably get sick of hearing this, but it does help tremendously. And if you want to see more of these, be sure you, like I said, check the description. Also, there's a lot of different resources down there. But I hope you guys enjoyed this, and here's the final product. And I sized this to exactly HD width, so this should come off pretty good on YouTube. So thanks again for watching, as always, and I will see you guys in the next one.